Rintarou Okabe, a mad scientist with a serious obsession with science, is on a mission to blow people's minds. Alongside his airheaded but sweet friend Mayuri Shiina and tech wizard roommate Itaru Hashida, he kicks off the Future Gadget Lab, claiming they're going to change the world. Things get wild when Okabe crashes a time travel conference and accidentally discovers that their microwave can send text messages into the past. Naturally, this messes with the timeline, and before he knows it, Okabe's got the shady CERN organization breathing down his neck. But before we begin the story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. In the buzzing electronics district of Tokyo, Rintarou Okabe, a guy with slicked back hair and a lab coat, is taking his childhood friend, Mayuri Shiina, to a press conference at Radio Hall. The event is all about the invention of the century, a time machine. Suddenly, Rintarou feels a tremor he thinks is an earthquake, but soon spots a strange object on the roof. Mayuri interrupts his thoughts, dragging him towards something more fun. They find themselves in front of vending machines, where Mayuri bemoans her lack of 100 yen coins. Ironically, Rintarou decides to waste his coin on a blind grab. To his surprise, he scores the rare metal Upa toy. Not interested in it, he hands it over to Mayuri, who happily names it. As the conference announcement blares, they part ways. Inside, Dr. Nakabachi kicks off the lecture while Mayuri wanders outside, later admitting she lost her precious metal Upa. Meanwhile, Rintarou grows alarmed by Nakabachi's theories, feeling they echo the infamous John Teeter. This rubs Nakabachi the wrong way. Before Rintarou can stir up more trouble, a sharp young woman pulls him aside. It's Kurisu Makise, a renowned scientist. She snatches his phone, only to find it's dead. Rintarou tries to play it cool but ends up sprinting away, nervous about their previous encounter. He soon receives a mysterious message, only to discover it's just static. Mayuri reappears, still fretting over her lost toy. Rintarou tells her to move on, but when she mentions its auction value, he softens. Mayuri reminds him they'd never sell it anyway. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream shatters the air, sending Mayuri into a panic about its source. Rintarou, sensing danger, tells her to leave the building. He peeks inside a room with the door ajar and is hit with a horrifying sight. Kurisu Makise, the woman he spoke to earlier, lies lifeless in a pool of her own blood. Shaken, Rintarou stumbles out and mutters to Mayuri, "Someone stabbed Kurisu Makise on the 8th floor of Radio Hall." The wail of ambulance sirens cuts through the lively chaos of Akihabara. Though rattled, he walks away, only to find himself in an even stranger situation after hitting send on his phone. Out of nowhere, he receives a chilling message. Unknown number, 0.57124. After sending word about Kurisu's death, Rintarou finds himself completely alone in Akihabara. He heads back to the conference building, where Kurisu was murdered, and runs into Mayuri, who seems blissfully unaware of the tragedy. His paranoia spikes until he's stunned by an artificial satellite that has crashed atop the building. Joined by Itaru Hashida, a savvy hacker, Rintarou jokingly names his lab members in front of a TV monitor showing a comical alpaca face. The two bicker, with Itaru glued to the web while Rintarou revels in his own genius. Soon, Itaru switches the channel to breaking news about the satellite crash, and Mayuri nudges Rintarou about how mad he was when the conference was canceled. Rintarou realizes he may have stumbled into the machinations of a mysterious organization. He finds their lab's TV broken, and with Itaru unhelpful, Rintarou begrudgingly hauls the old TV under the scorching sun to a repair shop run by Yugo Tenuji. After a painful negotiation over the repair cost, Rintarou leaves, sulking, but Mayuri's cheer lifts his spirits. Fed up with Mr. Braun's oppression, Rintarou orders Itaru to activate Future Gadget number 8, despite Itaru's disdain for Rintarou's antics. The experiment, turning bananas into green jelly, draws Mayuri's protests, but she ultimately gives in. After the bananas transform, Rintarou drags the reluctant Itaru outside for a seminar at the Akihabara Techno Forum. Accidentally, Rintarou discovers that the message he sent about Kurisu's death was dated 5 days in the past, on the 23rd. His heart races when he sees Kurisu standing outside the elevator, alive and well. He can't believe his eyes. Rintarou Okabe stumbles into a jaw-dropping scene at Dai Building. Kurisu Makise, the girl he thought was dead, stands before him, alive and kicking. Confused and desperate for answers, he tries to inspect her, but Kurisu slaps him with a harassment label. Before he can process the moment, Kurisu is called away, and Okabe, feeling dramatic, introduces himself as Huuin Kiyoma. Turns out, Kurisu is the one giving the lecture. As she begins, Okabe and his buddy Itaru Hashida sit in the back, still reeling from the shock of her existence. When Kurisu boldly states, "Time machines are foolishness," Okabe can't hold back. He argues that it's too soon to dismiss the possibility of time travel, but Kurisu counters with her brilliance, turning the lecture into a debate. Ultimately, she crushes his hopes, backed by her spot in a prestigious science journal. Later, Okabe is sulking when a text from Mayuri Shiina leads him to Yanabayashi Shrine, where he meets Luka Urushibara, a boy with a feminine vibe swinging a sword. Okabe, wanting to shake off the grim day, jokingly demands an exorcism from Luka, who panics and prepares for a ritual. After some banter, they leave with Luka's snacks. As sunset paints Akihabara, Okabe walks with Mayuri, who heads to work at a maid cafe, May Queen Nyan Squareward. He soon encounters Mr. Tanuji, who mentions a new part-timer, Suzuha Amane, who seems oddly interested in Okabe. That night, he digs into the mysteries of time travel and stumbles upon John Titor, a self-proclaimed time traveler, only to be hit with a twist. His friend Daru doesn't even know who Titor is. On July 29, 2010, Okabe spots a girl snapping his picture and, in a panic, chases her down. She reveals she's documenting something else entirely and tries to blackmail him into revealing info about an old computer unit. Later, at May Queen plus Nyan Squareward, Okabe chats with Daru about the IBM 5100, a legendary computer. Soon after, a message from the girl, Moika Kiryu, arrives, filled with emojis, making Okabe suspicious. Back at the lab, Okabe analyzes a gel banana, confirming it's been molecularly altered. He decides to experiment again with the phone wave, name subject to change, using a banana labeled with Mayuri's name. After an anxious moment, the microwave finishes, and to their shock, the banana has vanished, leading them to wonder if they've created a teleportation device. Just then, Kurisu appears, witnessing their latest breakthrough. Kurisu bursts into Rintarou's secret headquarters, triggering a heated confrontation. Itaru, however, seems to have teamed up with her to find Rintarou's lab, making Rintarou suspicious that his friend might have tipped off the agency. Kurisu, unfazed, reintroduces herself and offers a handshake, which Rintarou refuses, sensing her murderous intent. She takes a seat, eyeing the gel banana on the table. Initially, she came to check if Rintarou's claim about her death was true, but the banana catches her attention. As Suzuha flips channels on TV, Kurisu inspects the bizarre banana, noting its softness and uncharacteristic attachment to the bunch. Itaru, finding Kurisu's line about perverts' bananas amusing, taunts her. Unlike Mayuri, who is an easy target for Itaru's antics, Kurisu blushes, prompting Rintarou to join in, much to her embarrassment. Kurisu shifts focus back to the gel banana, suspecting the microwave behind them holds the key. Rintarou hurriedly covers it, and Itaru suggests they may need Kurisu's help with the microwave's development. Rintarou, still wary, offers her an ultimatum: join the lab and forget any past sexual harassment. Kurisu reluctantly agrees after an exchange of childish banter. Soon Mayuri arrives, elated to meet their new lab member. But the team is quickly drawn into work when Itaru reports a strange lightning event involving the microwave. Rintarou recalls the moment he sent a message about Kurisu's death, and Itaru remembers connecting his phone to the microwave. The three decide to recreate the incident to see if they can replicate the results. Mayuri unexpectedly opens the microwave, causing a bolt of electricity and an explosion, leaving the room in smoke. When the dust clears, Rintarou checks his phone and finds that Itaru's message was received, dated exactly 1 day earlier. The microwave has sent a message back in time. Rintarou is ecstatic, declaring the microwave a working time machine. The next day, Rintarou receives 13 messages from Shining Finger, who wants to meet. He invites Itaru, but he's busy with the phone microwave, which is no longer producing gel bananas. Meanwhile, Kurisu has vanished after Rintarou's time machine declaration. Itaru shows Rintarou a picture of CERN's Large Hadron Collider, LHC, which sparks Rintarou's interest in the possibility of time travel. CERN denies the creation of black holes, but Rintarou pushes Itaru to hack into their systems to uncover the truth. He leaves the bill for the food stand with Itaru. At the lab, Rintarou learns from Suzuha about the IBN 5100, a vital piece of tech that could help change the future. The two then dive deeper into John Titor's theories on world lines and the dystopian future that may be coming. Itaru, frustrated with his hacking attempts, is left alone by Rintarou and Mayuri, who share a quiet moment eating snacks. Later, Itaru triumphantly announces that he has hacked into CERN. He leads Rintarou into their systems, revealing email conversations about a Z program involving mini black holes. One final report shocks them both. Human is dead. Mismatch. Itaru drops a bombshell on Rintarou. Someone's been killed by an experiment from CERN. But after a fruitless hacking session, Itaru calls it quits for the day. As he digs into some Odin, Rintarou recalls Suzuha's info about the IBN 5100 and John Titor's final message. Deciding it's time to contact Titor, Rintarou dives in. Later, Rintarou and Mayuri are at the laundry, dealing with an overflowing load of clothes, thanks to Itaru's size. Suzuha shows up, says her hellos, and heads off to work. Rintarou then teases Mr. Tanuji, leading to one of their usual back-and-forths. Meanwhile, Mayuri does her Stardust Shake hand, a habit Rintarou remembers from childhood. Meanwhile, Kurisu is still stuck on the time machine experiment, struggling to make sense of it all. She's skeptical, but settles on electromagnetic wave disruption as a possible explanation, minus the gel banana part. Then, she remembers she needs to hit the laundry too. At the laundry, Rintarou receives messages from Shining Finger and a surprising reply from John Titor. He rushes back to tell Itaru, but neither Itaru nor Mayuri are up for helping him track down the IBN 5100. Rintarou then runs into Kurisu, who's avoiding him, but gets dragged into his crazy scheme anyway. After some back and forth, Kurisu admits she doesn't want to repeat her father's mistakes. Rintarou, shocked, reconsiders asking her to join the lab. Before she leaves, he asks if she knows anything about the IBN 5100. Kurisu listens, but dismisses him as crazy. Rintarou later heads to a donburi shop, where Mayuri messages him about Ferris knowing something about the IBN 5100. Rintarou storms out and heads to Mei Queen Nyanyan, where Ferris is hosting a card game contest. Rintarou gets roped into the game and, despite his plans, is soundly defeated. But it's worth it. Ferris reveals she's seen a similar computer at an Akihabara shrine. Meanwhile, Kurisu's done her homework and confirms the IBN 5100 can analyze special programming languages. Rintarou tracks down Luca about the shrine computer, and soon, he and Kurisu are on their way there. After a bit of back and forth, Luca leads them to the shrine's storage room, where they find the old computer. Donated 10 years ago with a message about a man who would need it. They start bickering over who'll carry the 24 kilograms beast back, but Luca's dad is relieved to see them getting along. The trip ends with Rintarou and Kurisu arguing again, each carrying half the weight. The day winds down as Suzuha locks up the electronics shop, joined by Rintarou and Kurisu, who's lugging a heavy box. Suzuha guesses it's the IBN 5100, surprising the mad scientist. When Suzuha spots Kurisu, her gaze shifts like a predator locking onto prey, but Mr. Tanuji interrupts, snapping her out of it. Kurisu is mildly rattled by the tension. Later at the lab, Mayuri greets Kurisu warmly, and Rintarou teases her over whether to stay or leave. As Itaru digs into the IBN 5100, he hits a snag. Connecting it to a modern computer is impossible. But with the right parts, Itaru sends Rintarou on an errand, only for him to pass the job to Kurisu, causing another argument. Meanwhile, Mayuri gives Kurisu a tour of the apartment, while Rintarou ends up shopping for parts with Suzuha, who unexpectedly helps him pick them out. At a vending machine, Suzuha reveals she's been in contact with an expert on IBNs, but the expert died years ago. She apologizes for her earlier behavior with Kurisu, but Rintarou brushes it off, understanding her frustrations. A passing helicopter catches their attention, and Suzuha, thinking it's a bombing, relaxes when it turns out to be a media chopper. She invites Rintarou to the fireworks display, exchanging emails before leaving. Back at the lab, Kurisu tries on Rintarou's lab coat, which excites him since no one else has ever worn one. They share a bowl of ramen, and Kurisu beats him at a trading card game, teasing him about his poor strategy. When she calls him Okabe, he freaks out, scaring her into tears. He apologizes, but she insists she's fine. August 1st, 2010. Itaru finally links the IBM 5100 to his computer, and they discover shocking data. CERN's secret project involved creating a utopia with time travel. The experiment stages included human trials, which horrifies Kurisu, but Rintarou's already aware. He presses Itaru to hack into the emails about the project. Despite his fears, Itaru dives in, revealing reports of failed human trials that transported victims back in time, turning their bodies into jelly-like substances. Kurisu explains the science behind it, using Kerr black holes to compress human bodies and send them into the past. Despite the grim revelations, Rintarou sees it as a challenge, determined to surpass CERN with his own time-traveling machine. 5 days after the satellite crash in Akihabara, the site has turned into a tourist hotspot. Among the crowd is Moeka Kiryu, glued to her phone. After getting a message from FB, she quickly replies, dodging a reporter's interview request. Meanwhile, Suzuha on lunch break joins Okabe and Daru at a beef bowl restaurant. Suzuha is excited to try the dish for the first time, while Daru grumbles about Okabe leaving him to pay last time. Okabe brushes him off, sparking the staff's ire. The tension is broken when Mayuri arrives. The group heads to the CRT shop, where they meet Kurisu. Suzuha glares at her again, but Mr. Braun calls Suzuha back to work. The others head to the lab, where Okabe calls a roundtable meeting. He announces the need to perfect the phone microwave, suggesting they name the phenomenon of sending messages to the past. After some banter, Mayuri's DeLorean mail is chosen, shortened to D-mail. Experiments begin, with the team sending a D-mail and testing the microwave. The first message is successfully sent to the past, but broken into 2 parts. Later, at a convenience store, Daru mentions his own D-mail message was cut off. Okabe is reminded of the Jellyman reports. Outside the store, Okabe runs into Moeka, who attempts to text him. Daru, intrigued by her appearance, tries to introduce himself, but she ignores him, leaving him disappointed. Back at the lab, Okabe tries to calm Mr. Braun, but when that fails, he returns to the lab. Mayuri tells him Moeka has been texting him. Meanwhile, Kurisu explains the time mechanics behind the D-mails. Okabe suggests they rest, but a sense of unease lingers. Okabe later dreams he is falling into a black hole, hearing Kurisu's voice explaining that time and space have shifted. He reaches for the black hole, but then finds himself in a jelly-like state. The next morning, Okabe is woken by his buzzing phone. Moka's texts say she's on her way up to the lab. He rushes to open the door just before she knocks. Surprised, Moka continues texting him even in person. She asks to see the IBM 5100, which Okabe reluctantly lets her examine but refuses to lend out. As Daru, Mayuri, and Kurisu arrive, they casually discuss the D-mails and time machine. Moeka, curious, texts Okabe asking about their conversation, signed FB. Deciding to trust her, Okabe makes Moeka Lab member number 005. At the cost of Mayuri's microwave, the phone microwave evolves into version 1.03, now capable of sending messages to any phone. Mayuri tests it, and the success excites Okaranen, though he's wary of Moeka snapping photos. However, Rintarou soon fears that his future device has caught his landlord's attention and rushes to check with Suzuha. Fortunately, Mr. Braun is out, much to his relief. Later, Kurisu and Mayuri return from a quick store run, but to Rintarou's dismay, there's no Dr. Pepper in their bags. Kurisu suggests vegetable juice instead, leading Rintarou to call a round-table meeting about the next phase of Operation Erd, changing the past. Despite Kurisu's warnings about time paradoxes, Rintarou pushes forward with his first plan to win the lottery. Mayuri is disappointed by Rintarou's selfish use of the phone microwave, but Daru is more practical, eyeing the potential computer parts he can buy with the winnings. Kurisu finds Rintarou's plan ridiculous, which irritates him, especially coming from someone who lives like a celebrity. Daru advises Rintarou to choose a specific lottery, and Rintarou shifts focus when he notices Moeka has disappeared and wandered off to the IBM 5100. She asks to borrow it via email, but Rintarou refuses, instructing Mayuri and Kurisu to watch over Moeka, which annoys Kurisu further. Daru takes Rintarou through a few lottery websites, and Rintarou settles on the Lotto 6 for his experiment. He hesitates when he sees the first prize is 200 million yen, choosing instead to aim for the third prize of 700,000 yen. Meanwhile, Moeka gets a quick tour of the future gadget lab from Mayuri, taking pictures along the way. The The tour ends with Moika being allowed to send a message back in time containing the winning numbers. The experiment begins, and Rintarou appears to enjoy himself, joking with Kurisu. However, as sparks fly from the phone microwave, Rintarou hesitates to press the send key, fearful of causing a time paradox. After a moment, he sends the message, and almost immediately, he feels something strange. Suddenly, Rintarou finds himself back at the moment when he first mentioned the plan to change the past. He discovers he has the winning lottery numbers, but Kurisu doesn't recall being called Celebtine, a nickname she should have heard minutes earlier. No one remembers the experiment either. To Rintarou's confusion, Luca walks in with a lottery ticket, apologizing for getting one number wrong from the set Okaran gave him a week ago. As Kurisu pieces it together, she realizes Rintarou must have used the phone microwave a week ago. Rintarou notices a bottle of Dr. Pepper on the table, a bottle that wasn't there before the experiment began. Rintarou, shaken by a familiar unease he last felt when Kurisu died, checks in with Suzuha about the time machine. She overheard everything through the lab's open window, but promises to keep quiet, even suggesting he reach out to John Titor for advice. Rintarou recalls Titor's warning about time paradoxes. Altering the past shifts the world line's divergence number, erasing and replacing memories. In this new world line, Luca buys the lottery ticket, but Rintarou's confused. How does he remember both timelines? Later, Rintarou contacts Titor while Kurisu lounges nearby, flipping through a magazine. Soon, his inbox is flooded with messages. Luca, apologizing for his mistake, Mocha asking for another tour of the lab, Daru, stuck outside May Queen Nyanyan without his wallet. Then, Mayuri calls from the playground, worried about him. For the first time that day, Rintarou smiles. But the calm is short-lived. Titor's reply arrives, confirming Rintarou's confusion. He shouldn't remember the past that was overwritten. Titor reveals that time travel via email was unknown in 2036 and believes Rintarou holds the key to breaking the 1% divergence barrier, a task Titor has been struggling with. With the weight of the world's fate on his shoulders, Titor calls Rintarou the Messiah. In the lab, Okabe is shocked when he gets a message from John Titor, telling him he's the chosen one to save the world. At first, he's stunned, but then he laughs it off, saying he's a mad scientist who craves chaos. Daru walks in, and Okabe announces they'll keep experimenting with the phone microwave, even if it means upsetting Mr. Braun. Kurisu protests, but Okabe teases her, reminding her she was on board earlier. When Daru asks about it, Kurisu realizes Okabe has already changed the past with a D-mail. Curious, Kurisu asks how Okabe remembers the past world lines. Okabe explains he might have a power called reading Steiner, which lets him retain his memories while jumping between timelines, according to John Titor. Meanwhile, Luca is seen at the shrine, still thinking about the lottery ticket Okabe suggested. Back at the lab, Okabe, Kurisu, and Daru try sending a D-mail 5 days into the past to change the outcome of Daru's match against Ferris. When they check with Mayuri, she confirms Daru lost, proving the experiment failed. Later at the park, Okabe suggests Kurisu send the next D-mail, but she refuses, saying she doesn't want to mess with the past. Okabe calls her a spectator who's too scared to take risks. Before they can continue, Mocha starts texting Okabe, begging to send a D-mail. After ignoring her at first, Mocha appears right in front of them, asking directly. The next day, Okabe waits outside the CRT shop. Mr. Braun and Nai show up, and Mr. Braun scolds him for being lazy. Mayuri arrives shortly after, handing out candy to both of them. Suzu arrives on her bike and asks Okabe if he spoke to John Titor. Okabe confirms, but is unsure whether to trust him, which surprises Suzuha. Kurisu arrives next, and Suzuha glares at her for the third time, leaving everyone confused. Moeka then shows up, snapping pictures of everyone. In the lab, the group is preparing for another experiment. Okabe asks Moeka to create a simple D-mail message that could easily reveal if the past was changed. Moeka sends a message telling her past self from 4 days ago not to buy her current phone. Just before they start the phone microwave, Luca shows up with a watermelon as an apology for messing up the lottery ticket Okabe suggested. He leaves quickly after giving it. The group continues with the experiment. The phone microwave powers up, and Mocha sends her D-mail. Okabe's reading Steiner activates, signaling a shift in the timeline. Okabe, realizing his reading Steiner ability has triggered again, stands in front of the phone microwave, watching Daru and Kurisu talk, but he can't hear them. He quickly notices that Mocha and the watermelon Luca brought earlier are missing. Mayuri confirms Luca never came by, and no one but Okabe remembers Moeka. Kurisu figures out that Okabe must have sent another D-mail. Panicking, Okabe checks his messages. Moeka's texts are still there. He texts her, and she replies, saying she's busy. Relieved, he begins to wonder about the true extent of his ability and whether he is truly the savior John Tidor claims him to be. Later, Okabe and Kurisu talk on the roof about the effects of the D-mail. Mayuri joins them, and the two leave together, leaving Okabe to contemplate his ability in solitude. That afternoon, Luca visits the lab, embarrassed by Mayuri's cosplay outfit. After some awkward moments, Luca asks the lab members if he can send a D-mail to the past. He wants to change his gender, inspired by overhearing their previous D-mail experiment. Kurisu is baffled, still thinking Luca is a girl, and Okabe, skeptical, agrees to help Luca. Okabe questions whether sending a text message can really change someone's gender, but Luca insists it's possible. After some thinking, Okabe sends Luca on a mission to confirm whether his mother had a pager while pregnant. Luca returns with the pager number, and the group sends the D-mail, triggering the reading Steiner. Back in front of the phone microwave, Okabe wonders if the D-mail worked. His suspicion grows when he stares at Luca, noticing something feels off. Kurisu calls him out on it, and although Luca seems the same, Okabe knows something has changed. He just isn't sure what. Rintarou and Daru discuss their D-mail discoveries at May Queen Nyan Nyan, but Daru points out they couldn't change his match with Faris. Rintarou, blaming Daru for the loss, insists a time machine's just a few tweaks away. However, Faris overhears and, with a piercing stare, asks about their project. While Rintarou is unfazed by her charms, Daru quickly spills the beans on the D-mail experiment. Back at the lab, Rintarou heads to the rooftop to dry laundry and finds Kurisu on a phone call, visibly upset. She denies crying, but Rintarou offers to listen whenever she needs. When she turns to him in surprise, he downplays his sentiment and jokes about using her for grunt work. Meanwhile, Faris visits Mayuri after her shift. Mayuri confesses her excitement about the time machine, but fears Rintarou's growing obsession. Later, Mayuri visits the lab with lunch, and Daru can't resist commenting on her school uniform. As Rintarou grows frustrated with the casual lunch, Kurisu dismisses his time travel ideas, pointing out that even CERN failed. But Rintarou remains stubborn, while Kurisu leaks her irritation to Daru. Daru reports a hitch with the IBN 5100, and Rintarou discovers it's missing. Kurisu links the disappearance to the butterfly effect, warning Rintarou of the consequences of changing the past. Rintarou contacts Luca, who traces the IBN 5100 to Yanabanashi Shrine, but it's gone. Faris confirms her father doesn't have it, though he owns many old PCs. Rintarou chases down Mocha Kiryu, who's also searching for the IBN 5100, but knows nothing. The group heads to Faris's apartment, where Rintarou learns she's actually Rumiho Akiha, the daughter of Akihabara's cultural mogul. She agrees to help if Rintarou allows her to send a D-mail, but he's cautious after learning about the butterfly effect. Reluctantly, he agrees, and Faris becomes lab member number 007. Faris prepares a mysterious message to send 10 years into the past. With Okabe's cue, she sends the D-mail, and Rintarou feels the familiar nausea as reality shifts. He soon finds himself in an unfamiliar house, meeting Faris's father. He asks about the IBN 5100, but Faris's father reveals he no longer has it, crushing Rintarou's hopes. As Rintarou leaves, he realizes something might have changed that he can't undo. Later, when Mayuri suggests visiting Nakano for doujinshi, Rintarou points out a nearby Toranoana. But the Akihabara they walk through feels wrong, a city no longer defined by otaku culture and mo. Rintarou is uneasy, wondering what else has changed. Okabe is stunned to find Akihabara stripped of its iconic mo culture. Mayuri and Daru deny the existence of places like Toranoana, and even May Queen Nyan Nyan has vanished. One simple text message has radically altered the world around him. Suzuha is at the radio building, gazing at the wreckage caused by a fallen satellite, while Okabe and Daru chat at the restaurant that replaced May Queen. Okabe learns that in this world line, they met Faris through a Rainet tournament. At the lab, Okabe reflects that although the past has changed, the bonds between his friends remain the same. Mayuri, flipping through a cosplay magazine with Luca, proposes a girls-only beach trip. Okabe remarks that Luca can't join since he's a guy, sparking a tearful reaction from Luca. Upon further inspection, Okabe discovers Luca is actually a girl, prompting Kurisu to smack him with a book. Later, Okabe, still nursing his pain, chats with Suzuha. She reveals she's in Tokyo searching for her father and shares a clue, a pin he used to wear. Okabe, in full mad scientist mode, recruits her as lab member number 08 and plans to send her dad a D-mail. Suzuha laughs, feeling better, and agrees to come to the lab the next day, regardless of her father's whereabouts. On August 9th, Okabe plans a party for Suzuha, whether she finds her father or not. While chatting, Okabe receives a creepy text that unnerves him. Later, Mayuri shares a memory of Okabe's near-death fever, which sparks a discussion about Okabe's mysterious reading Steiner ability. That night, while trying to prepare for the party, chaos ensues in the lab, with accidents involving gadgets. Amid the chaos, Kurisu opens up about feeling at home in the lab, and Okabe admits he created it for the friends he's found. When Suzuha doesn't show, Okabe goes searching for her in the rain, determined to stop her from leaving the city. He sends a D-mail to himself, telling him to follow Suzuha. On August 10th, Okabe realizes he's shifted world lines again. He meets Suzuha at the lab, learning that in this timeline she did come to the party, and even attended Daru's time travel meeting to search for her father. Suzuha tells him she had a great time at the party and will continue searching for her dad, but she's now officially a part of the lab. Okabe pulls off a daring experiment by having Suzuha distract Mr. Braun in a Mission Impossible-style move. Suzuha whips off her shirt and covers Mr. Braun's head, giving Okabe the opening to set the experiment in motion. But as the building shakes, the Braun family notices, and things go south when a screwdriver falls on Mr. Braun's remote, turning off the TV and halting the experiment. Okabe has a light bulb moment, realizing that Mr. Braun's TV was the key to sending D-mails. Mr. Braun punches him for his trouble. Back at the lab, Okabe reveals that the TV was the lifter they needed. Kurisu, skeptical about sending a person back in time, proposes a new idea: sending someone's memories via D-mail to their past self. Okabe, excited, pushes forward with her plan, though Kurisu warns it'll require a lot of parts, and even then, they may not be enough. On their way to buy parts, Okabe explains the concept to Mayuri, who's hesitant. They run into Moika, who gets spooked and bolts when the time leap idea is revealed. Later, Suzuha, punished for her distraction, walks around in a tank top, prompting Okabe to tease her about looking like a Street Fighter character. Nai apologizes for her dad's earlier punch, but Okabe takes it in stride. Before heading out to buy parts, Suzuha drops a bombshell. Kurisu works for CERN. After buying the parts, Okabe stumbles upon something unsettling. Kurisu's been posting on forums, much like John Tidor. Kurisu denies any ties to CERN, but Okabe isn't buying it. Later, in a heart-to-heart at the park, Kurisu opens up about her fractured relationship with her father, a physicist she once admired. Their exchange ended when she critiqued his work too harshly. Kurisu fears her father will disapprove of her time leap machine, but Okabe vows to help her fix their relationship. Meanwhile, Mayuri struggles with heavy bags, and at the lab, Okabe gets into a pudding dispute with Kurisu over a labeled snack. When Mayuri shows up with sleepover gear, the tension escalates. Okabe heads out for groceries but receives a chilling text, "You know too much," with an image of a decapitated doll. Panicked, he rushes back to the lab, only to find it dark and empty. In a frantic search, he walks in on Kurisu and Mayuri bathing, only to realize something is seriously wrong. Daru later discovers the lab's computer has been unknowingly connected to CERN's network, implying that they've been hacked. Okabe, horrified, fears CERN is behind the threatening message. Kurisu, using CERN's LHC, manages to shrink memories down to D-mail size, finally perfecting her time leap machine. It can send someone's memories back up to 2 days into the past. But Rintarou, still shaken by the creepy threats he's been getting, hesitates to use it. He suggests they go public with their discoveries instead. The lab crew decides to throw a party, but things heat up when Kurisu clashes with Suzuha, who insists she's meant to be a CERN spy in the future. Luckily, Mayuri steps in and cools things down. Just as a bomb threat to the rail system makes headlines, Suzuha, freaked out by the lab's link to CERN, bolts. Then, in a shocking turn, Moika shows up with a gang of armed goons, revealing herself as a rounder working for CERN. She orders Rintarou, Kurisu, and Daru to be captured, then without hesitation, shoots Mayuri, deciding she's not worth keeping around. Moika Kiryu, with 5 armed men, announces that CERN is confiscating the lab's time machine and taking Okabe, Kurisu, and Daru into custody. When Okabe asks about Mayuri, Moika coldly says she's unnecessary and shoots Mayuri in the head. Okabe, in shock, tries to hold Mayuri's lifeless body, but Moika appears behind him, aiming a gun at his head. Suzuha bursts in, taking down the armed men and grabbing one of their guns. A tense standoff ensues with Suzuha aiming at Moika, who counters with her gun trained on Suzuha's head. Amid the standoff, Suzuha breaks the silence, telling the lab members that the time leap machine is activated. Creating a distraction, Suzuha buys enough time for Kurisu to power up the machine. Okabe insists on time leaping, despite Kurisu's concerns. Just as the leap begins, Kurisu is shot in the back. A flashback reveals Okabe and Mayuri at a cemetery. Okabe shares a memory of Mayuri visiting her grandmother's grave, waiting for her to return. One day, as sunlight surrounds Mayuri, it seems like she might disappear. Okabe rushes to her and declares for the first time that she is his hostage and can't leave. In the lab, Okabe realizes the time leap worked as he finds himself on August 13, 2010, at 4:56 p.m. After informing Kurisu and Daru the conference is cancelled, he rushes to find Mayuri. After checking several locations, he finally finds her in an alley, staring at a star. They head to the train station, where Okabe remembers the bomb threat that had shut down the trains. As they attempt to leave, a man tries to apprehend Okabe, but is unsuccessful. While running from more men, Okabe is knocked down. He urges Mayuri to keep running, but a car suddenly hits her, killing her instantly. Devastated, Okabe swears to save her and time leaps again. At 4:07 p.m. on the same day, Okabe convinces Kurisu and Daru to leave the lab. He contacts Luca to keep Mayuri at the shrine, and they evade suspicious men while heading to the subway. As they wait for the train, Mayuri's pocket watch stops. She says she has many questions but will ask later, and Okabe promises to explain everything. Just as the next train arrives, Mayuri is pushed into its path. The train stops, and Okabe, shocked, sees Nai, who pushed her by accident. Picking up Mayuri's dropped pocket watch, Okabe vows again to save her, and time leaps once more. Rintarou's attempts to save Mayuri keep falling apart, each one more hopeless than the last. Then, Moeka reveals a chilling truth. CERN is after them because of their time machine and their plans to go public with it. Despair starts to swallow Rintarou as he faces failure after failure, but then Kurisu steps in. She pushes him to open up about everything and gives him some key phrases to use on her past self to get her to work with him. After Rintarou is sent back just before the time leap machine is completed, he manages to convince Kurisu to help. But just as they think they're making progress, Suzuha shows up with a shocking revelation. She tells them the only way to save Mayuri is to escape the Alpha World Line Attractor field, where Mayuri's death is set in stone because world lines are all converging to that tragic outcome. They need to cross the 1% divergence point into the Beta World Line, where things might unfold differently. Suzuha then takes them to a crashed satellite, which turns out to be a time machine. And in a twist that blows Rintarou's mind, Suzuha reveals she's actually John Titor from the future, coming from the year 2036. Suzuha tells them that she originally planned to travel back to 1975 to grab an IBN 5100, but decided to make a detour to 2010 to search for her father instead. However, when she tries to start her time machine, it's busted. Rintarou quickly figures out it's because of the storm on the night he stopped her from leaving. Back in the past, Rintarou jumps 2 days before the time leap machine is finished and calls everyone in the lab together to spill the truth. Daru gets to work fixing Suzuha's broken machine, while Mayuri suggests they all pitch in to help Suzuha find her father, using a pin badge he gave her as a clue. Suzuha also hands Rintarou a gadget called the divergence meter, a device that tracks how much the world lines differ. She also shares how, in the future, Rintarou led the resistance against CERN. They spend the rest of the day hunting for Suzuha's father. Just as Rintaro is starting to lose hope, Suzuha thanks him. And then, a clue comes through from a badge maker who might know where her father is. Unable to get much info about the badge maker's client, Rintaro decides to leap back in time to confront the person. But to his surprise, it turns out to be Daru, who had just wanted to make a fake badge to lift Suzuha's spirits. Daru then drops a bombshell. Suzuha's time machine can only travel backward, meaning once she leaves, they won't be able to see her again. As the time machine nears completion, Mayuri figures out from the name of the machine that Suzuha's father is actually Daru. After a brief but emotional reunion, Suzuha heads back to 1975. However, Rintarou notices that the divergence meter hasn't budged. A few hours later, Yugo shows up with a letter from Suzuha, written in the year 2000. In it, she reveals that she committed suicide a year later, devastated by the failure of her mission. The crash caused by the damaged time machine wiped her memories for 24 years. Blaming himself for stopping Suzuha that stormy night, Rintarou decides to send a D-mail, stopping himself from interfering and allowing her to use the time machine before it was damaged. However, this also erases her memory of meeting her father. In the New World line, Rintarou talks to Yugo again and learns that Suzuha didn't die as she originally had in this timeline. She passed away from an illness instead. Yugo gives Rintarou Suzuha's divergence meter, which now shows a different reading. Despite the change in divergence, Mayuri's death still happens, just a day later than before. Kurisu theorizes that, since Rintarou's D-mail to stop Suzuha delayed the attack, reversing the effects of the other D-mails might bring them back to a world line where they have the IBN 5100. That way, they can hack into CERN and delete the records that have been tracking them. Rintarou begins by focusing on how to undo Ferris's D-mail. After helping her dodge a rival gang of Rynet players, he takes her to the spot where her maid cafe used to be. He starts telling her about the way Akihabara was back in the day, which sparks some of Ferris's memories from that world line. She remembers the D-mail she sent, a fake ransom note that kept her father from boarding a plane that was doomed to crash. The rival gang catches up with them, but just as things look bad, Ferris's father swoops in to rescue them. Rintarou learns from him that after the fake ransom, he had to sell the IBN 5100 to pay for the ransom, which meant the machine was gone. Coming to terms with the reality of her father's death, Ferris agrees to send a new D-mail to cancel out the old one, putting Akihabara back to its original Mo vibe. However, the IBN 5100 is still out of Rintarou's reach, slipping further away. Rintarou sits down with Luca and tells her about how she used to be male, urging her to reverse the D-mail that altered her fate, which could change Mayuri's. Luca initially refuses to believe him, but eventually agrees to send the D-mail on one condition. Rintarou has to take her on a date. Taking Kurisu and Daru's advice about dating to heart, Rintarou and Luca set off for their awkward date filled with clumsy conversation and uncomfortable silences. But as they spend time together, Luca starts to remember the previous world line, where she was male, and the memories distress her. If she returns to that world line, it means she'll have to give up on her feelings for Rintarou, which is something she's not ready to do. Before sending the D-mail to undo her first one, Rintarou realizes that the awkwardness during their date was because he'd been trying to act like someone he wasn't. With this epiphany, he takes Luca back to the shrine and spends the rest of the day training with her, just like they used to. Their bond restored, Rintarou finally sends the D-mail, shifting them back to the world line where Luca is a boy. Now, with one D-mail reversed, Rintarou moves on to the next task, undoing Mocha's D-mail. Moeka stands on a windy rooftop, holding her phone, lips pursed. The screen snaps away from her, leaving a tense silence. In the lab, the atmosphere is heavy. Daru types away, Mayuri debates how to cook ramen, and Okabe and Kurisu sit apart, silent. Mayuri invites Kurisu to a comic convention, prompting Okabe to recite Mayuri's plans in a grim tone. Kurisu, sensing his tension, drags him to the roof. There, Okabe reveals his painful truth. Mayuri will die. He can't stop it, and all he can do is wait. He explains that every undone D-mail pushes her death back a day, but it's never enough. His next target is Mocha, and he plans to undo her D-mail, but needs her phone. Kurisu offers her support, promising to help no matter how many world lines they jump through. The next day, Okabe investigates. He tracks Moika's former workplace, only to find she worked there for one day, then disappeared. He digs deeper and discovers she's dead. Suicide. The police close off her apartment. Okabe's suspicions rise. Did the rounders kill her? As he prepares for another leap, Kurisu calls. Mayuri's dead. Time leap. Okabe finds himself in the middle of his pudding argument with Kurisu. He snaps back to the mission. Moika's life is still in danger. He heads to her apartment. The door is unlocked. Inside, Moika huddles in a corner, shaking, her phone clutched tight, typing FB over and over, pleading for orders. Okabe tries to talk, but Moika's too lost in her obsession. Frustrated, he wrestles the phone from her, breaking a table. Realization hits. This is where it all went wrong. Moika killed Mayuri in the first world line. In a moment of fury, Okabe punches Moika, kicking her against the wall, before bolting out, slamming the door shut. Moika screams and pounds on it, but Okabe doesn't listen. He calls Kurisu, telling her to power up the microwave. The D-mail is sent, but when Okabe looks around, he's still stuck in the same world line. Kurisu and Okabe are baffled. The D-mail isn't working. Okabe realizes that Moika's phone is the same one from the previous world lines, indicating the problem isn't about the phone itself. As Moika slams her table against the door in frustration, Okabe decides to interrogate her to uncover the message. He forces the door open, slams her to the ground, and kisses her to silence the noise from the woman next door. But Moika bites his lip, drawing blood. Reluctantly, she concedes and asks what she has to do to get her phone back. Okabe demands to know about her D-mail. Moika, devastated, refuses to betray them and admits her life is meaningless without FB. Okabe counters that FB doesn't even have a real relationship with her. A flashback reveals Moka's tragic past as a lonely schoolgirl who almost took her own life, until a text from FB gave her purpose. Okabe tells her that FB abandoned her, just like the world did, and that's why she's suicidal. Moka breaks down, sobbing on the floor. Okabe, softened, starts going through her messages, asking about FB's gender. Moika admits she doesn't know, having never spoken to FB on the phone, but is devoted because FB made her feel needed. Okabe finds the D-mail, a request to steal the IBN 5100 from the shrine. He and Kurisu prepare to send the D-mail to undo it, but it fails again. Realization strikes. Moika will only follow the D-mail if FB tells her to. Okabe hands Moika back her phone and declares he'll find FB himself. Moika, torn, admits she would follow FB's orders, even if it meant betraying her. Okabe, determined to fight fate, promises Moka that her suicide won't be left to chance. Just as he turns to leave, Moka finally tells him where the IBN 5100 is hidden. Despite Okabe knowing where the IBN 5100 is, Kurisu advises against trying to steal it. Instead, she suggests they stake out the place to track down FB, and Moika decides to join them. As they watch the IBN 5100 being moved, they follow it as it's passed from person to person, including Yugo, and eventually put on a plane headed for France, where CERN is located. Rintarou, Moika, and Kurisu confront Yugo, who reveals he's FB, a rounder working for CERN. He explains he's been forced into this role to protect Nai. Following the rounder code, those who fail their mission must die. Yugo kills Moka before taking his own life. Rintarou then uses Yugo's phone to send a D-mail, canceling out Moka's message. This changes the world line, bringing Moka and Yugo back to life and returning the IBN 5100 to the future Gadget Lab. But as Rintarou has Daru hack into the CERN network to erase all their data, he suddenly realizes that in doing so, he'll have to return to a world line where Kurisu is dead. Daru preps the lab, but Okabe cuts him off, rushing to the roof. Mayuri arrives, offering Okabe water and her hat for shade. She invites him to the convention, but he brushes it off, saying he's busy with the organization. After some back and forth, Okabe joins her, realizing that Mayuri's death is imminent. She offers him books about a mecha show, but he dismisses them, saying he's tied up in ninja business. Meanwhile, Kurisu is looking for one of Okabe's books for Daru, planning to sue him later. Okabe calls her, asking if they've made progress. She pushes for answers, but he hangs up, planning to save Mayuri without switching world lines. As night falls, Okabe realizes the timing. Mayuri's death is near. They wander into an alley where Mayuri asks why he's still with her. Okabe cheers up, suggesting they all do a group cosplay next time. Suddenly, a car pulls up and the clocks stop. Okabe rushes to push her out of the way, but Mayuri sacrifices herself, taking the blow and dying in Okabe's arms. Devastated, Okabe returns to the lab, placing Mayuri's body on the couch. He sees a note from Kurisu but ignores it, using the phone wave to time leap back. In a different world line, he finds Daru and Kurisu noticing his despair, halting their hacking plans. On August 15th, Okabe lies on the roof, avoiding Kurisu's concern until she finally gets him to open up. He confesses about the D-mail and Mayuri's repeated deaths, revealing his growing frustration. Kurisu urges him to go after Mayuri, and Okabe tracks her to her grandmother's grave. There, Mayuri reveals her dreams of past world lines where Okabe tries to save her but is always too late. She wonders what it all means. Okabe, moved, promises to stay by her side. They talk about their past, and Okabe admits he's been hurting. Later that night, Kurisu visits the Radio Kaikan building where Suzuha's time machine crashed. In the dark, she finds the room where she was stabbed in another world line. When Okabe finds her, they briefly talk about Mayuri, but Kurisu quickly changes the subject. Rain begins to pour, drenching them both, and they seek shelter inside. As they try to dry off, Kurisu's wet clothes reveal more than intended, much to Okabe's surprise. The tension rises when Kurisu notices Okabe's torn lab coat and offers to stitch it. She's unsure of the thread color, black, red, or pink, and after some reluctance, Okabe agrees. While she stitches, Kurisu asks why he tore it, leading Okabe to admit he searched the city for her when she didn't answer her phone. This revelation makes Kurisu smile. Once the stitching is done, Okabe dons the coat, only to discover she used pink thread. Kurisu asks if she dies in this building, leading Okabe to wonder if she remembers her death. She confesses that her memories are hazy, and she remembers him obsessing over Mayuri's fate, even at the cost of his own heart. Despite her eventual death, Kurisu asks him to return to the world line, even if it means her loss, as there's no other way. Okabe refuses and heads back to the lab to find a solution. As he prepares for another time leap, Kurisu intervenes, asking him to erase the D-mail. Okabe insists he can handle Mayuri's death, but Kurisu slaps him, claiming his heart's already broken. She argues that letting her go will break him even more. Overcome with emotion, Okabe hugs her, realizing how much she means to him. In a moment of clarity, Okabe confesses his love. Kurisu, taken aback, kisses him, claiming it's for memory's sake. He then asks for another kiss, and they share a passionate moment. The next day, as Kurisu prepares to leave for America, Okabe gives her a bamboo copter camera. She reluctantly accepts and throws him a soda bottle as a final gesture. She mouths something to him as she leaves, but when Okabe looks back, she's gone. Later, back at the lab, Daru hacks into CERN to delete the D-mail. Okabe is about to erase it when Kurisu bursts in, desperate to confess her love. But before she can speak, Okabe's reading Steiner activates, and he finds himself back in the same place, where no one remembers Kurisu. Overcome with emotion, Okabe questions if this is truly for the best. As he ships away his lab equipment, Daru gets a call from someone claiming to be connected to him, Suzuha, who urgently needs Okabe's help to prevent World War III.